today we're talking about really what it's like to start your journey in an emerging technology. What is it like when you start out and you're new and you're going to school or you're going to university and you are embarking upon this quest to learn? And I've brought in a special guest today. It's Ayomide, who is a law graduate at OAU in Nigeria, and she's going to talk to us about her journey. Ayomide, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jamilia. It's amazing to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to talk to you because when I first saw your profile and your story, you're being a law grad and being in Nigeria, I thought, this is obviously, you've got some motivation to do this. And then also you're into DeFi. And I think that is what is special and unique about what it is that you're doing. Most law graduates just think, I've learned the law. That's enough. I'm going to go and practice that. What sparked your interest to get into DeFi?
Thank you so much for that question. I would just say that I was just privileged to have heard about DeFi at the time that I did, right? So I had a friend who was just getting into the crypto space because most of us over here were not very conversant with, the concept of wallets and all of those things. But I had a friend who was just getting into the crypto space and she told me about it. I was in my second year at the university at the time. And, I found it intriguing that the entire concept of being able to hold money in a place that is not a bank. So of course I was interested. And then from there, it just grew to, writing for DeFi projects and, just getting more conversant with what the DeFi industry is like. And I think about 3 years down my journey, I started to think of ways through which I can combine my legal knowledge with the decentralized finance industry. Because as you rightly said, most lawyers, especially law students, are usually, we find it a bit hard to break away from the typical idea of what the law is, the rigidity of the law. And I just had to try to make myself understand that, if you're going to be a 21st century lawyer, you need to be able to do things differently. You need to be able to acclimatize get yourself, conversant with the tech, right? And so, yeah, DeFi was just that starting point for me. And then I obviously decided to start finding ways by which I can bring in my legal knowledge and then, with the regulatory developments that started coming up as well at the time. So it was not like I had the idea per se that laws could be relevant in DeFi, because when you think about it, DeFi is supposed to take power away from the center, right? However, I saw that, there were several regulatory developments coming into the space at the time, and it just opened my mind to possibilities and the need for policies that would guide the space. So, yeah, that's about it.
That's really interesting. And I recall our last conversation, you mentioned that you may have had some influence when you were younger and growing up from your parents. So what do your parents do?
Well, I grew up at the intersection. I would say I grew up at the intersection of law and finance, banking and finance, right? Because my father is a judicial reporter, right? He's a journalist and he works closely with the judicial system here in Nigeria. And so as a child, I used to work with him a lot, go to court with him. And he never forced it on me. He never even suggested it per se that I should be a lawyer. However, all of these things around me at the time they just made it a lot more attractive, right? And so when the time came to go to the university, it was like a no-brainer for me that I was going to study law. And then with the banking side, which is where my mom comes in, my mom was a banker, right? So I think we could just say that I got that from her, right? Because the interest in finance, with decentralized finance, it just came together nicely. So, yeah, that's pretty much what informed my interests, right? What served as the basis for my interest. And I would say that it has led me to what is going to be one of my life's best works, which is what I'm doing with DeFi Law Digest, which is to teach the African continent, starting with Nigeria, about the laws of DeFi and, how we can create change in the DeFi space. So it sounds like a very purpose-driven venture for me. It is a very purpose-driven venture for me.
I think so. And I think it's interesting how you may not have known, you may not have realized, but even as your upbringing, with your father's work and your mother's work, you came to this point of curiosity about what is DeFi. And we keep saying this term, And some listeners aren't really familiar with these terms such as DeFi, this decentralized finance. How would you describe decentralized finance if you could?
Okay, so DeFi essentially is that system. It's an infrastructure that tries to take power, financial, access and all of those things from the control of centralized authorities. So when I say centralized authorities, you can think of banks, the governments and things like that. So DeFi tries to, make finance as autonomous as possible and as accessible, to everyone as much as possible. And it does this with the introduction of technologies like blockchain technology, smart contracts, automated market makers, and several other protocols that have come in, through this innovation. Now, I should give a little background that DeFi started from, the idea of cryptocurrencies, which I'm sure you might not know what DeFi is, but almost everybody would be familiar with the concept of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin was actually the first cryptocurrency. And then, from there, we went into Ethereum, and DeFi just became this whole infrastructure that offers financial services that you could normally find in the traditional financial space in the DeFi space, but this time making it a lot more decentralized, autonomous, and innovative, basically. So yeah, it's just a lot of tech and money when you think about it.
The best of both worlds, right? Tech and money. And
Exactly. Yeah.
why do you think that DeFi is important for Nigeria today? I mean, a lot of people look at Nigeria and they see, an emerging market, lots of opportunity. But is there anything in particular that you think, right now in 2025, Nigeria needs DeFi?
Yeah, we're a growing economy actually, and we have, had a lot of challenges with economic changes and, the governments and all of those things. So I think for Nigerians, especially youths in Nigeria, DeFi is basic, and the tech industry generally, I must add, is basically like a safe haven or an opportunity. We see it as an opportunity for us to, really be able to offer skills and, get some level of finance, attain a better financial level, right, for most of us, while still doing things that are legitimate. So it just brings about that opportunity for youths in the Nigerian society to be a part of something amazing. And we are really enterprising, if I do say so myself. I need to speak a lot to that. I would love to speak a lot to that, but I would just, summarize by saying that we are a really enterprising people. And so DeFi being as innovative and as, new, fresh as it is a very attractive industry for most of us. So I think in such a time as this, DeFi is so, it's so crucial because for one, as I said earlier, we have the economic challenges and things like that. And, for us to try to really be, really be a part of what's going on in the world generally, in terms of tech, DeFi really offers that. As you've said, it's a really good combination of the two sides, the tech part and the monetary aspects as well. So yeah, it's something that we're really, really taking advantage of. And we're just hoping that the government, and they are trying as well, I should add, we're hoping that the government would, be a lot more permissive of the industry while still, putting in place policies that would protect investors and things like that. So that's the gray area that we're still trying to work on here in Nigeria. But regardless, crypto is not banned here, unlike in China. So we still get to,
Right.
utilize tech and all of those things. So,
Absolutely. And it's funny listening to you talk about how you've learned about it and you're able to talk about it and explain it. So many people are listening and probably wondering, how did she learn that? How did she get that information? Because for many people to learn about DeFi and to learn about anything really in the Web3 and blockchain space, it seems difficult. It seems almost unattainable. Are there any tips or strategies that you would give to those people who are listening now?
okay, yeah, definitely. There's a lot I can share. I've been here for 3 to 4 years. So yeah, I would say that the first thing that you should know or that you work on is your mindset. And I say that because many people come into the space just because they've heard that they can make money from the crypto industry. That's very true. Like you can make life changing money from the crypto industry, but you need to approach it with the right mindset. And that would include, wanting to actually know about what space you're going into. Like, you cannot make the most of it, or you end up getting cheated if you come into the space and you're not even knowledgeable about what goes on there and all of that. So the first things you should do would be to make sure that you have the right mindset and that you get knowledge. And how do you get knowledge? Now, the internet is an amazing place. Today's internet is somewhere that you can find almost anything, information about almost anything that you're looking for. So for people that might not be able to get access to, a tutor or somebody that can really teach them the intricacies of DeFi, and I say that because, some people might not be able to afford such classes, or they might not even have access to such persons, right? You can always go on the internet, Yeah, so basically you should first off, try to get the knowledge, know what the space is about, what even is crypto, what does it really offer aside money. Like, so basically, you need to get interested in the tech, right? And, there are several aspects of the DeFi industry I must also add, because another thing that you need to look out for is the error of getting confused. So when you join crypto Twitter, when you start hearing about DeFi and all of those things, you hear about protocols, you hear about lending, you hear about GameFi, so many aspects. You need to double down on one per time, right? You can decide to explore as many as possible, but you can't do it all at the same time. So you also need to be able to decide what you're going to focus on. I have a friend that describes that as, knowing your niche and then niching down. Right. So in this case, you know that, okay, you want to get into the DeFi space. That's English. However, in the DeFi space, you also have, it's like an entire ecosystem of different aspects. There are different sides to the industry. So you also need to niche down in that sense. So are you going to be a trader, or do you want to go into GameFi, or do you want to, go into maybe DAO governance, or you want to just learn about all of those areas and then apply yourself to that area that you've chosen. You need to make those decisions. So yeah, and then your interest. You need to be very sure that you're interested in the space. And I'll give an example. There are people that are traders in the space. And as most people would know now, it's quite a downtime in the industry, with coins everywhere is basically red. We're in peak bear season right now. So if you don't have that interest, if you've not developed that interest that, okay, this is what I really want to do, you're going to be really discouraged. And then you would, you, you get discouraged based on the money you've lost and all of those things. So yeah, make sure that you're really interested in the space. You can also decide that you bring your Web2 skills. If you don't have the heart to be a trader, you don't want to stress yourself too much or lose too much money, you can also just decide that you bring your Web2 skills into Web3. And what does that mean? Basically, if you are a content writer, or you're a graphic designer, or you do any of these skills that, typical companies in the Web2 space. Web2 is basically the space that, we generally know about now, right? I don't want to go too much into that, but basically, your office work, all of those things, that's what we refer to as
Right.
Web2 generally. So yeah, if you have skills that you offer, you're a project manager, you're a product designer, whatever it is, we have companies in the Web3 space as well that require those skills and that would pay you to offer those skills. So yeah, you can bring those in. You don't necessarily have to know everything about crypto, but of course you learn the basics so that you can properly interact in the space. So,
Right.
yeah.
And now you've mentioned crypto a few times, and I think it's important for our listeners to know is that while, you may be talking about crypto in this particular instance, that there's so much about Web3 that they can learn, whether they want to learn about digital assets or NFTs or, just the technology itself. And there's so many angles to it, whether you want to be a developer or do you want to be a strategist. I think a lot of times when people think about Web3 or even DeFi, really, when they think about DeFi, they think crypto and then they think Bitcoin and then, and there's so much more to the space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had a friend who once, told me that she thought DeFi was a coin. And I tried so hard because I understood that she was just not knowledgeable about it. So it was really hard to not laugh, but yeah, I had to take out the time to just explain to her that, DeFi is actually the ecosystem. It's like the infrastructure that enables the offering of these decentralized financial services. right? And then cryptocurrencies, of course, I like to think of crypto or tokens generally as the fuel of DeFi, because there's nothing you want to do in the DeFi space really that you do not need to um, be able to interact with the token, one token or the other, right? So if you're using a decentralized exchange, you're going to be swapping maybe Ethereum to Arbitrum, or you're utilizing bridges and all of those things. So yeah, I like to think of crypto as, the currency that runs DeFi basically. But yeah, it's obviously a lot larger than that, because you have Bitcoin, which is even the origin of, the entire concept of digital currencies and all of those things. And then Web3 is basically the third phase of the internet, right? So we've had three phases, or we're gradually stepping into the third phase of the internet. And the first phase was Web 1, where basically you could only read information on the internet. That was the .com phase, right? And so with the .com phase, people could only read information on the internet. Then gradually we stepped into Web 2, where you could now read and write, information on the internet. And an example of that would be, the invention of social networks like WhatsApp, like Facebook, like LinkedIn. You could contribute your data, your information, your knowledge, right, on those platforms, and it would appear on the internet. So as an example, if you search out your page, or you search out a topic on something that you've written on LinkedIn before, it would actually come up on Google, right? So that means the information you've written, or the knowledge that you have, captured into words, exists on the internet. So now what Web3 is proposing is a system or a phase of the internet where we can actually read, write, and own information, data, and even money. So DeFi is the aspect of Web3 that controls, the financial side. And it does this, Web3 is really focused on blockchain technology, as well as, the concept of decentralization, generally distributed ledger technologies, right, that would enable the existence of this system where, you can really have decentralized access. So you'll be able to own your data, instead of having a situation where IG controls your data, or they feed your data, as is commonly said, right? They feed your data to
Right.
ads. That's where you get all those ads that you see on these platforms from. So in Web3, you'd actually be able to own your data, own your funds, and then, monetize it as you want. You can monetize your content. And we already have some social networks that are, really taking us into that phase, right? There's Zora, there's Lens Protocol, there's Mirror.xyz, right? Web3, social networks that are trying to enable that stage of content monetization and ownership. So yeah, it's such an
There's so
interesting
much
journey,
going
and
on.
so much. I do hope listeners have been able to follow through, and I'm explaining it as simply as possible for them.
Yeah. No, this is, I think for people listening, when they think about owning your data, and the fact that now the reason that we get so many ads, the reason why you may have an instance where you're, using one device and you're looking up, let's say, a dog collar on that one device or one network or website, and then you go on another device, totally different device, and then an ad for a dog collar pops up and you're like, wait a minute, how did they, it is all connected.
How
Your data is being
exactly the
shared.
synchronization. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was going to say for consumers, for people who are interested in protecting their data, that's really like one of the big value points of Web3. But I would also ask you, Ayomide, for people who are listening to you talk, right? So let's say I know nothing about Web3 and you're talking about all of these things, and they may be thinking, well, yeah, I could learn about it, but what's in it for me? What's in it for me? I have a 9 to 5. I have bills. I have responsibilities. I think a lot of times people are brought back to this issue of, does this help me in any way? How does it help me
Mm,
now? What would you say to that
mm.
person?
I think that's a brilliant question, and it's a concern that has been on the minds of several people, especially people that were trying to, in quotes, bring on chain, right? And on chain is just, trying to onboard them into the Web3 space. And I was having a conversation with someone some days ago, and she just talked about how in the DeFi space we really need to start to focus on usability, right? Trying to make the blockchain that back end tech as it should be. And the example that we explored in that conversation was with regards to, say, Facebook, for example, right? When the era of Facebook and those other social media networks came, we were not, I didn't need to know about JavaScript or C++ to be able to use Facebook. It just showed, like, I just knew what the utility was, or I could connect with friends, or I could, link up with old classmates and all of those things. I can share information, tell people around the world what's going on with me and things like that. So the utility was clear. So I would say that it's a very valid concern because we're still relatively in the early phases of Web3, right? So there's still a lot of things to figure out. You still have developers trying as much as they can to, ensure that the user interface and user experience of these centralized applications that they're building and the other protocols that they're building are as accessible and as understandable as possible. However, to really, really get down to your question, I would say that um, when you really think about the precedent, right, what I explained earlier about the Web 1 phase and the Web 2 phase and now the Web 3 phase, you realize that there is actually a need to, in quotes, get with the times, if I can put it that way, right? So you do not necessarily want to be left out in that sense, right? That sounds really strong. It's not like we're moving into like a new universe or anything like that, or the metaverse or anything like that. But it's just important that you are able to try to familiarize yourself with the tech. However, to make that as easy as possible for for beginners and new joiners and all of that, we need to have developers and people that are key players in the space make it as seamless as possible, even down to putting up steps on the applications, right? When I use some fintech platforms and like some, there's a platform known as Money Point, which is really common here in Nigeria. It's a fintech platform. It basically lets you keep money, save money. Piggyvest as well lets you save money and all of that. So these platforms they've actually hacked, the TradFi way of marketing and getting users to use a product. And I say that because they are able to, put steps. Once you open the application, you have, oh, this is step one. This is where you have to go to first. This is what this part of the app helps you do. This is what this part helps you achieve. This is what you can do on this side of the app and all of those things. And I really thought about it. And that's not something that we really explored with DeFi applications because you're just pretty much thrown into the decentralized exchange or the lending protocol and all of those things. And you're just left to figure it out yourself, or you end up going to YouTube to find, oh, how can I use Trust Wallet? How can I navigate Uniswap and all of those things? Right. So it's really important if we are, I imagine that there are key players in the space that would be listening to this as well, developers and stuff. So it's important that we are able to really work on usability, functionality, and a seamless experience for users so that they actually get to know what the utility is for them. It's not too complicated and they're not confused by the whole technical jargon and the novelty of it all. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're getting there. I mean, with people like you who are, getting involved early, particularly being a law grad, you're going to have a lot of impact on people who are watching you and looking to learn the way that you're learning. So Ayomide, thank you so much for your time today. And before we go, I would like to know, is there anything that you're looking forward to doing in the next, I guess, year or two? Because when you're a law grad, that's your time frame. That's long term, a year or two, with your work and your career aspects.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've not really, told you about DeFi Law Digest over this course. So let me just give a brief on that. The DeFi Law Digest is essentially it's an initiative, a policy-focused initiative that is really targeted at bringing legal education and regulatory awareness to the decentralized finance space. And we focus on doing this through three pillars. That's, those pillars are the pillar of content, community, and consultancy, right? So we try to sensitize people with our social media platforms on, things that go on in the space. We explain concepts. We post news about regulatory updates in Nigeria and globally as well. We have a newsletter where this information is also communicated. And then we're trying to build a community of legal professionals, especially law students. But I found that, a lot of lawyers, once you start to practice, really, it can be a little hard to pivot, right? So a lot of lawyers are already really focused on litigation and those other aspects. However, if we can, get young lawyers, get law students to be really interested in this tech, they can start to see the their value offering in the DeFi space. And we actually do need lawyers, right? Because largely a lot of countries are coming up with regulatory developments. Nigeria, for example, has come up with the Securities and Exchanges Commission here in Nigeria came up with the exposure amendments, right, to some laws that they have created before, some guidelines that they have put out before. And basically it's demanding in that guideline, it's demanding that um, virtual assets providers basically they adhere to certain rules. So if you're trying, what that would mean is that if you're trying to build a crypto company in Nigeria, or you are a company based abroad and you want to bring your business to Nigerians, offer your business to Nigerians, you need to follow the laws, right? And who's going to let you know what those laws are? It's lawyers. It's lawyers, and the space is gradually growing, right? So it's lawyers that are going to that are going to help you with regulatory compliance, business, the development of your business documents and all of those things. And so it's very important that as we learn the law on the one hand, we also start to understand concepts of the tech. So yeah, we're really working towards onboarding as many law students as possible. Over the next year or two, we're trying to broaden our content base for one, and just get more people to know what we do. And then we're trying to open up clubs across, we'll start with 5 universities in Nigeria, right? So that we can get, law students to start to understand, the tech, and try to onboard them into the space, right? My goal really is to focus on bringing lawyers into the space. Like, I'm really, really, really big on that. So yeah, we want to make as much impact as possible. Also go into policy, advocacy, and advisory, right? So that's where the consultancy part of our 3 Cs comes in, right? So we try to, provide advisory for companies on the one hand, for crypto companies on the one hand, and then for policymakers in the industry in Nigeria on the other hand, right? So what that would look like is trying to influence positive and safe policies that would not stifle innovation, the DeFi innovation in Nigeria, but instead would ensure that it is protecting the rights of investors and the interests of investors, while also ensuring that the tech is properly safeguarded, right? And that there's room for people to grow, and maybe the invention of regulatory incubators, regulatory sandboxes for different companies to really just be able to test their tech before putting it out there for more people to use. So we're really looking to be a part of those policy discussions, and as much as possible be part of legal education in DeFi, right? So yeah, I hope that it is. I know it's going to be an amazing journey from here, because it's been an awesome one so far. So I really just look forward to everything that is to come and the actualization of these plans. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ayomide. We will follow your journey through this, and just thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing there in Nigeria. And we look forward to more updates.
Thank you. I look forward to sharing that as well. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure getting to share my opinions with you.